Happy Thursday. What's going on?
Oh, God.
Guys?
I love when we start and I'm already laughing.
Yeah, exactly. David Crow, welcome.
Thank you.
You know, David, I got to tell you, you're the first guest I'm going to do this on because I just left an event with the guy who told me that this was a problem. Are you ready for this problem? It's a great problem to have. He goes, you guys' conversations are amazing, but I want to know immediately why I'm going to listen to the rest of the show. And I realized that we've never done that because the guests we have on, and I suspect you're in this camp based on how we met you, and we're going to get into everything. You're a guy we could talk to about 80 things. Like this conversation could go in so many different directions. And so like whatever we plan to talk about, it's like, you know what I mean? So I'm going to tell everybody you're an acupuncturist, and that's about as far as I think I'm willing to take this. Like, you know, I don't know. Like, you know, there's no TLDR on some of these conversations, you know?
Right.
But welcome, man. Welcome.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you. Matt, could you raise your volume just a little bit?
Oh, sure. I sure definitely can do that. You tell me if that's even better.
Now I think we're closer on the same level with Tom.
All right. Yeah, no problem. You know, the best part about this platform is it does all that for us later on. It just levels us all out. So we're all good.
I also am insanely loud as a person.
No, cool.
Thank you both. Thank you both for inviting me. Great to be here. All right.
David, you and I, just so our audience knows, because Scott has been on the show once, I don't know. He's been on, we've talked about it.
We were on his,
and then we were on his
ours,
show.
Yeah.
So Scott is one of those amazing human beings that I can't say enough good about, and has never, ever one time introduced us to somebody that we didn't also equally love, like by the end of the first conversation. Like,
nice.
He keeps good company, as they say.
Yeah, it was a pleasure and an honor to meet him and be on his Webdelics podcast also. There was quite a lot of really enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, he's
so
great.
Which deity did you pick? Which Roman or Greek god did you?
That was on a second podcast. We did two.
That was
the first one we did was on his Webdelics.
Okay.
I'm part of that project too, David. I love Webdelics as like one of my passion projects right now, and that's like such a cool spot. And so
nice. Well, the second one was on his Greek archetypes, and the deity that I chose was Asclepius.
Don't know that one.
The god of medicine.
Well, there you go. A topic you and he probably could wax poetically about for hours on end.
Right.
So David, walk us into how you got into this place you're in now, and sort of let's start there.
Right. Well, if we go back to the conversation with Scott Mason, it started very early because I encountered traditional plant medicine in the mountains of Oaxaca with the curandera Maria Sabina. When I was a teenager, actually very fortunate to have a genuine indigenous entheogenic experience early in life. And from
that's wild. So that was that prior to her being known in North America? Like, is that prior to her fame here, or is that around the same time? I mean, how'd you find her?
The chronology of it was that she was discovered in the 50s by Gordon Moss.
Wow.
And he was the mycologist who actually introduced this curandera using, the psilocybin mushrooms in the mountains of Oaxaca, and wrote about it in Life magazine in the 50s. And from that, she became well known during the 60s. And people made pilgrimages to the village where she lived during the 60s, including the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Andrew Weil and people like that who were in the first wave. And I came a bit after that. I came in the 70s, and everything had cooled down. Sort of like the waves of the 60s pilgrims had stopped.
How old are we talking? How old are you at this point, you think? Like
19.
Okay.
19.
Wow.
Okay.
And so from that experience, I had a kind of, awakening that, there's something powerful out here in indigenous cultures and in the plant world, and had a very specific inspiration to study that. But of course, that was in the mid 70s when there wasn't anything going on with natural medicine here. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I was one of the first people to kind of track down where is this education starting to happen. And I ended up in one of the first acupuncture colleges in the country in San Francisco, became familiar with Chinese medicine at that point, and licensed as an acupuncturist. And during that time in the Bay Area, I also met the Tibetan Buddhist community through a great spiritual teacher, Kalu Rinpoche, who was like the real Himalayan yogi, and was very inspired by him. And so I got very interested in studying the deeper roots of Asian medicine. And basically, after several years of practicing acupuncture and herbal medicine in San Francisco, I closed my clinic and moved to the Himalayas and studied with a Tibetan doctor, and there became his only Western student for several years. And I was also very fortunate to be one of the first Westerners to meet a variety of Ayurvedic doctors in Nepal and then later in India. And so I ended up spending several years going back and forth and living in Kathmandu and studying Tibetan medicine and Ayurvedic medicine in a way that is not really available anymore. It was really like classical internships, like real, being a disciple of these teachers. So that's how I got my education in Ayurveda and Tibetan medicine, along with my education in Chinese medicine. And this was all going back and forth to my clinics in California. And at the same time, I was also very interested in the integration of these medical teachings with their spiritual lineages, because they're inseparable, basically. Mm-hmm. Chinese medicine is inseparable from Taoism, and Qigong, and alchemy, and Ayurveda is inseparable from the Vedas and Tantra, and all of these things have always been closely woven together. So I was also studying with a variety of meditation teachers, and it has just been going on ever since. I mean, basically, that's my entire story, and that's my clinical practice. So I've been in clinical practice for 40 years, doing all of these treatments. I was doing Ayurvedic treatments, early, Ayurvedic treatments before it was known here, integrated with acupuncture and herbal medicine. And I'm still doing that, except now I'm not doing the acupuncture in-person part. I'm doing telemedicine consultations, but teaching a lot about the integration of natural medicine and spiritual lineages together, like it was always done classically. So that's the big story.
David, I got to give you your I guess part of my history then, right? And we always, there's an expression in China. I'm not going to say it in Chinese because it'll sound horrible, but when drinking water, remember the source, right? So I would put you at like this Gen 1 of Western practitioners, right? You had to go over there to get it. And by the time I got to it, it was already, you mentioned the first school. I probably went to like the 80th, and I went much later. So it
not that much later. You're a senior practitioner with 25 years of experience.
I thank you for the compliment, but yeah, I lost my mentor a few years ago, and I felt I said it to one of my training brothers that I came up with. I feel like I'm a Ronin now, right? I don't have somebody guiding me anymore. And he goes, dude, we've been out for over 20 years. Like, what do you need? And I'm like, there's still so much I don't know. And I would say that, like, I'll never get it right. Some of it's lost to time. Some of it, I'm sure if you went back to the places where you studied, they'd be vastly different too. And good news, bad news, who knows, but it's a very interesting thing.
Well, the places that I studied at, they're all gone. And most of the teachers I studied with are gone also, and So we have that commonality that we studied with a traditional mentor, and now they have left, and that gives us a unique kind of responsibility to remember them and their teachings and apply it and try to fulfill as much as possible what they were giving us. But
you know what makes me so jealous about this conversation is you guys have that, and I love that you guys have that, but like the world doesn't have that. You know, and the closest that I get to that is I have a 25-year martial art backing, right, which has a very clear lineage, and my great sensei brought my style from Okinawa in the 50s to the Bronx, right? So like
that's substantial.
No, it's substantial, but it's like a fraction. Like I had a foot in that world. Like, you know, you guys were kind of living in it. I mean, hell, you're intense in the fucking Himalayas in this world. Like you're in it, right? Like, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't get a chance to experience. And I think that's a real shame, because even what little experience I have with that is really valuable to me as a core tenet of my person, as a major contributing factor to how I view and interact in the world, like how I show up as a human being. Like these are all heavily influenced by my martial arts. And it's really hard to pull that out. And I think people who don't have that miss that tether to something bigger than themselves. You know what I mean? Like at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what's missing is the cultural context. And getting an education in Asian medicine in a lot of ways doesn't make any sense if you haven't spent any time in Asia, because it's all part of the environment. It came out of the environment, and it came out of the culture and the language and the customs and the history and all these kind of things. And that's why I have a particular gratitude. I mean, the longer I study what I was given and the longer I practice what I was taught, the more I appreciate it and recognize how valuable it was. I mean, when I was there in my early 30s, I had no idea how valuable it was.
Sure.
But now that those teachers are gone, I really appreciate what they shared with me.
Well, that hits hard, man. That hits hard.
Yeah. But
and we don't do that.
It is the cultural context. And I would say that, okay, here's this one track, and I'm sitting down with my teachers, and, you know, this was, you know, even before computers. And so I was like writing notes by hand, and, you know,
you dinosaur.
listening to what they were saying. So there's this track of study, but then there's this track of the education that you get from being there. And that includes seeing the poverty and the existential questions that it raises about what's the role of medicine in a really contaminated world, and what's happening with the lineages, and why are people forgetting them? They don't even care. And the harvesting of the herbs and the deforestation and all of these issues that are part of the cultural experience that actually give the entire thing a much deeper, more profound context that you don't get if you're just taking an online course, or you're just, studying only in the West, So for me, I would say that in addition to having that really important experience, it also raised all of these very profound spiritual questions about suffering and poverty and politics and environmental destruction and loss of, these incredible cultural treasures. So yeah, it was a full education by being there. Absolutely. And medical education also, because I brought back several species of parasites every time I went.
Yeah. Right. Let me get your blink on this, because I think what a lot of people I've talked to that have been in the psychedelic world, for example, for a long time, and that doesn't necessarily imply or state indigenous psychedelic world, but certainly there's a big crossover in these things. And the one thing I think both of those camps would agree on is that where we're at now might not be the most spiritually or philosophically pure execution of these things, right? I know a lot of the indigenous in particular are pretty messed up when somebody says, come do an ayahuasca trip over here, and there's like a flashing neon sign and a waiver you're signing with you know what I mean? Like, it feels like not what the right process is.
It's like a bunch of Silicon Valley executives in a mansion.
Yeah, right. And that doesn't feel like the right thing. So talk to me, because your vantage point is probably the best person to answer this question. Talk to me about how you see this evolution, because I think on the other side of the bad interpretation of it is the reality that people are in fact waking up, and that however they're getting there, but like more people are more open to this now than I've seen ever in my 50 years on the planet.
Okay, so you mean specifically about the entheogenic use?
Well, I mean, I think that's something you're particularly suited to answer, but I think we could even start more broadly and say, like, zoom in on it.
Yeah, to something you said about, East Asian medicine as a whole, right? You don't separate the culture. You don't separate that from it. What happens, I think, when we do that, when we, God, I don't want to use the word whitewash or something, but like, I think that's partially appropriate here, the whitewashing of it, the appropriation of it.
Right, exactly. And that issue applies to yoga, and it applies to meditation teachings, and it applies to Asian spirituality and gurus in general. And it applies to the issue of natural medicine, and it applies to the issue of the entheogens. Now, it's a mystery to me how entheogens have ended up in mansions in Silicon Valley.
How is that a mystery? I'm just curious. That doesn't seem
it's a mystery to me, because they represent completely different states of consciousness.
Right.
So the entheogenic experience is something that we could say reconnects us to a very primordial level of the biosphere of the earth. Okay, it's a very deep ancestral biological connection to the consciousness of the earth. Okay, and that is completely the opposite of the kind of mental state that's necessary to work in and with computers and technology.
Oh, so we're going to disagree here, David. I'm not going to lie to you. We're going to tussle on this one, buddy.
Okay, so this is similar, I think, to experiences that people had in the 60s and 70s when they would take LSD and get stuck in a freeway or go to a grocery store and they would ask themselves, this must be apocalypse because these entheogens sensitize people so that they can really see how artificial and dangerously artificial our culture is. And so for me, I've always wondered, well, if people who work in technology actually have a really deep, profound spiritual awakening, how do they reconcile that? That's the question that I have had. Not how did the mushrooms get there, or how did the
No, I don't think that's what you meant. Yeah,
No. It's like, how do you reconcile the two frames of mind? Because one represents actually, this is a crucial topic now, because now we're starting to see that all of this technology is speeding up, and it's actually becoming clear that it's contributing to the destruction of the earth. Okay, now we've got the data.
Oh, we know that for sure. Yeah.
Data centers are, they're drinking all the water from the communities, and it's heating the communities, literally heating up the geography.
The
ground. And for what? Okay, for data. Okay, and so that's a particular mindset. But then what happens when a person goes deeply into this ancestral realm that's awakened by ayahuasca, and they actually start to feel that they're all, part of the plant consciousness, and all of that starts to come back? Well, it has been postulated by a lot of people, all the way back to Terence McKenna, that the entheogenic awakening, that sensitizing with our biological connection to the Gaian mind, the planetary biospheric consciousness, is what we need, okay, to overcome the destruction of this technological mind. Okay, so it's always been a question for me about how people in that world are reconciling this deeper awakening.
David, I have an answer for you out of the gate. I
have a question after he gives you his answer.
Listen, David, I honestly think this is actually I'm smiling because I think this is an interesting and repeatable experience that I've had where both sides of this equation, I think, have some core misunderstandings about the other side. And as a guy who has a podcast that deals a lot in psychedelics now, and I have a huge history with them myself and have a 27-year-old technology company, I have a different perspective on this, which is...
You're the expert then. I simply...
Well, no,
it's a question,
I am not an expert in anything.
No, it's a question in my mind. And so now you can illuminate it for me.
Well, so my take on this, actually, it would be more of a reflection on what you said than an answer. But I think that you're right. This experience does open your mind and clarify things. And I do agree with you even that it would lean, if not exclusively point towards this Gaiagenic direction, right? Like it does, in fact, make you keenly aware of your connection to terra firma. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden you're like, okay, I am actually on a biosphere. I'm not in a silicon chip. Like you're absolutely right about that. And I think, and this might just be the, I guess, anthropological reality, not necessarily like evolutionary reality, but in my timeline, when I was a teenager, psychedelics were dramatically illegal, like no question marks, no, 80s and early 90s. You would get caught with a sheet of acid, you're literally going to jail. Like it's a very clear cut, like it was no big deal. Now judges are microdosing. You know what I mean? Like the world is a fucking different spot, right? Like it's completely different. But why is that judge microdosing? Well, in my view, the same reason the technology people are doing it is because if you worked making profit for your 20s, 30s, and 40s, now, because of where we're at chronologically now, is it because I'm almost 50 or is it because we're in 2026? I don't know which one is more important. But either way, at 50, when I take a psychedelic experience, my output from that, my integration from that is how do I make my practices more sustainable, more life-giving, more community building? I mean, this show is the living embodiment of everything I'm saying, by the way. Like, it's like, how do we make a community and use technology to do it?
Yeah, right.
So it connects me, but it also propels me further because now I'm motivated and I have clearer direction.
So right. I'm gonna kind of ask my question while
no, go. I'm done. Go.
I don't think Matt is the typical use case. Let's say, and I think I said this, I was a guest on somebody's podcast and I'm like, look, if you're going to go do psychedelics and you're a douchebag when you go in and you're not going to do the integration, you're going to have this fantastic time, have nowhere to put it and go back to being a douchebag. So, like if you're not willing to do the work, if you're not willing to listen to the experience, I feel like you're just doing it to check a box. You're doing it because 100%. All the cool kids are doing it. You're doing it because, hey, I have more money than God. I don't know what to do with it. Let's get fucked up for 12 hours. And I don't want to take away from anyone's real psychedelic experience or altered state of consciousness. If
but not all of them are that.
But not all of them are that, right? Yeah, definitely not, right? Yes. Can you have a life-changing event? Can you have an idea that's going to help the population? Absolutely. Could you just sober up and go back to being a jerk?
Well, this is the important question about these ceremonies in indigenous cultures also. You see, it's not that phenomena that you're talking about is not unique to contemporary people either.
Oh, really?
Well, no, because
I never thought of that.
No, but
that's interesting.
No, because if we look back at the indigenous ceremonies, okay, and this is something that I have personally experienced in indigenous ceremonies.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
One of the primary reasons that people go in is because they're suffering. And they're suffering for a variety of reasons. Now, of course, this is different than 1,000 years ago. In contemporary indigenous ceremonies, even before, white people got in, okay, there was tremendous suffering on the reservation. And the Native American church, for example, back in the 1800s, this was like a place of healing for people. But what I have seen in my experiences being invited into the teepee of the Native American church is this exact same issue of integration. And people can come in, these guys can come in, and they can be the ceremonial leaders. And they can talk really nice, and they can sing beautifully, and they can pray beautifully and do all of these things. And then they go out of the teepee and they are still in the culture, and they are still having problems with alcohol. And the problems with alcohol are still causing the domestic violence. And so what we have then is an example of the complexity of humans and spiritual practice, okay? And it's not just in these cultures with entheogens. We also see this example with the transfer of the Dharma from Asia, and so many gurus coming to the West, and then, being put on this pedestal, and then they fall off and they are discovered to be totally corrupt. And so what we find then is that everywhere that people are people, humans are humans, and that it's very rare to find someone who's really deeply spiritually genuine and well integrated. And along the way, we meet all of these people who are trying to do that in these different contexts. And so it might be that it's in a sangha and following a guru, and then people are alienated because he's abusing people. Or it could be that it's in a peyote ceremony, and we get alienated because we find out that the spiritual teacher is an alcoholic. Okay, so the spiritual world is full of all of these human paradoxes and contradictions. So it's absolutely correct that this is something that's very confusing about all of this. And I think that your point there, Tom, about integrating the experience is absolutely crucial. And there was a very important point you made, Matt, about this question that I was asking, how do people integrate all of this, and how do they reconcile the deep, profound, face-to-face vision with the guy in mind, and then go back to working in their computers. And the key, I think, is really the context and the containers of the experience and the teachings and our orientation and the dose. And you said that, judges are microdosing. Well, they're not going to have the same kind of earth-shaking sort of breakthroughs. And at the same time, we also have to consider that a lot of people really shouldn't have earth-shaking experience because they won't be able to integrate it. They're just going to end up with a broken psyche, and they'll have to be on medications afterwards. So, great topic. What else?
So let me ask you. Let me ask you. I gotta keep pulling at this thread.
This is going to be a good one, man.
I gotta pull up this thread a little bit more, David. So listen, you're not wrong about anything you said, but let me turn this on its head a little bit.
Good.
And I actually, I'm going to say something that's wildly unpopular with Tom, but I'm going to say it anyway. I have a bit of an issue with this appropriation word and how it's used. And let me put some context on it. I'm not unaware of the inappropriate appropriations that have happened, right? But there is a razor fine line between appropriation and evolution. And especially in a global market where we live in, a global world, like my martial art that I was talking about earlier, for example, he got a 10th Dan in Okinawa, the first round eye to get one. He came back over here, brought it over here, and immediately severed ties with Japan, got a PhD in war psychology, and started his own line of martial arts, right? Now, does that make everything he learned in his 10th Dan instruction useless? Absolutely not. It just meant that's his foundation, and he went and did something different with it. Now, could we say he appropriated Japanese martial art to make an empire of martial art dojos that were derivative? We could. But he also got a PhD in war psychology and built upon this thing. And so at the end of the day, it wasn't unrelated, but it was different enough where it was like almost like paying homage to it. And I'm not saying everything, again, there is shitty appropriation, right? But like, because I wear mucklucks in the winter doesn't mean I'm appropriating Eskimo culture. It just means my feet were cold and I bought them at the store.
The term is Inuit.
I'm sorry. Fucking Tom. Keeping me honest. But you know, it's not always malicious, right? And I feel like the word is become like a third rail word, right? Like, okay, we've appropriated. Well, listen, the Silicon Valley douchebag having an ayahuasca ceremony in his living room might be a shitty version of appropriation, but that's not going to be always the case. I don't even know if it is already always the case, right? Like, so talk to me about like that, like evolutionary component of it, like, because this is evolving. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, the genie's not going back in the bottle here,
right.
You know?
Right. Well, the question is whether those guys in Silicon Valley are basically just having a party with what is really a sacrament, or whether the ceremony is being led by a Peruvian shaman who's really serious about it. Okay. So, yeah, I don't think that this issue of appropriation is necessarily the primary issue when it comes to entheogenic use. I think that the primary issue is respect and the containers, so that a person can do it so they get a beneficial experience. Okay. I think that because we're talking about plants that influence people's consciousness at a very high level, that it must be done within a particular context. And it doesn't have to be that it has to be in a teepee. It doesn't have to be in the Amazon.
Right.
But it has to be done in a container of reverence. Okay. And I think that that's also something that is lost when it's done, for just,
more of a recreational
shits and giggles.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. But that's where people also get hurt, because the difference is that when people use ayahuasca in the Amazon up until fairly recently, they grew up with it in the village. Okay. They were around the elders using it. They were invited in certain capacities at a certain age. They started helping with the ceremonies at a certain age. They learned about the plants. They learned how to do things. And so what's missing is the entire cultural integration that informs them of the power of the plants and the role of the plant in society. And they see what it's doing with people and for people and how people are handling it. And so that's what's missing, okay, is that there's no cultural context anymore. And that's also true that there's no real cultural context for the meditation lineages, and there's no cultural context for the herbal medicine lineages, and so on. And so things are out of context. Now, that's not appropriation, really, okay? That's just cultural confusion.
No, I get you.
And that has also been going on for thousands of years, because cultures have been interacting for thousands of years, and people have been taking things and sharing them between cultures forever. But my definition of appropriation, two very clear examples. One is when pharmaceuticals go in pharmaceutical companies go into the Amazon and, get the information from the shamans, develop a drug from it, make billions of dollars, and don't give anybody any credit or money for it. That's appropriation. Okay.
That is, in fact, yeah.
Or
that seems very clear. Yeah.
That seems much more clear. Yes.
Yeah.
Or fashion. Okay. The fashion industry does this also. Okay. They just steal things from indigenous people and they don't give any recognition. That's different. Okay. But in the case of people being interested in entheogens, I think it's a different kind of context. It's not really appropriation. It's more like, are people really prepared for it, because there's no cultural context? So that's
but David, No, that's great. But let me ask you a question though along that, because I think you're right. But again, I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing like if there is such a thing on the Silicon Valley side as purist, but I think what we see a lot is a dual purist perspective, right? On your side, it's like, look, let's have some reverence for this. Let's have a little respect for it. And that all makes sense. The cultural fluency and all that stuff. But from the other side, like just to play devil's advocate for a minute, the pharmacology side of that might say, well, listen, we're actually trying to optimize for a single effect. We isolated the compound that does that. We synthesized it. We learned our lesson from here. We took it, but we're making something wildly different. I'm not saying that that's better. I'm saying it's wildly different. So I think what I'm always curious about is, are we confusing two things that shouldn't be related at all? Like your ayahuasca therapy and some ayahuasca derivative that a pharmaceutical company made. Like, should we even be comparing them? We are now. That's what this conversation's about. But should we be? Like, I don't even know if these deserve to be in the same conversation.
No, great conversation. And I'll tell you the analogy that I'm very involved with, which is the research that's happening now into the active compounds of plants.
Right.
In the development of nutraceuticals. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is all fine because these are simply two different cultural ways of looking at plants. Okay. Now,
so these could coexist in your world.
So, and then well, I have kind of a follow-up question to that.
They do. They do coexist. And I'll give you an example. So astragalus. A lot of people have heard about astragalus. Okay, well, it's a major tonic for the immune system. Okay, now traditionally in Chinese medicine, it was the dry root was chopped and it was boiled in water to make a water decoction extract. Okay, now more recently, we have tinctures, which are extracts that are partly water and partly alcohol, and that gives us a different spectrum of constituents that come out that don't come out just in water. Now we have even more refined extracting methods to take out what's considered to be the most powerful compound, which is astragalicide number 4. Okay. Now, if we look at all of these, can we say, well, is one of them better? Is one of them more pure? No, it's simply 3 different extracting methods of the same plant. Now, the way that I'm looking at this is, okay, water decoction is actually easier to digest than astragalicide capsules, which can kind of irritate people's stomachs. That's because it's more concentrated. Mm-hmm. But what do we do with all of this? It just means that we have 3 different extracts. We can put them all together. We get a broad spectrum extract of one of the most important immune boosting plants. And so that makes it very applicable and very relevant at a medical level. And it doesn't get into any of the philosophical issues of, it's pharmaceutical based and it's not a whole plant and therefore it's not traditional herbal medicine. But when it comes to the question you're asking about entheogens and active compounds and things like that, it becomes even more important to understand the broader context, okay, because of the power that it has on consciousness.
Right.
Okay? And therefore, what I think should be considered is that the more powerful the molecule becomes, then the greater the benefits and the greater the potential harm. And
that seems very straightforward.
That's basically the whole pharmaceutical industry right there. Okay.
Right.
And therefore we can see, well, there's benefits of using plants, there's benefits of using pharmaceuticals, there's benefits of using ayahuasca, there's benefits of using just the DMT molecule. But the question becomes individualized use for the best results. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's what's missing. When people had a cultural container for this, it was much easier to understand who should take things and what, and how.
Yeah.
And this issue now is
setting things a lot easier under that storyline.
Okay, now the main topic where this is relevant now in the field of natural medicine is we are losing classical herbal medicine, and it's being replaced by influencers with products on the internet. Okay. And
Tom's head's gonna explode any second now.
No, dude, I learned a term called China maxing because someone was looking for an article on, it was something stupid, like why do the Chinese drink room temperature or warm water? And China maxing is, getting really into Chinese medicine. And I'm like, motherfucker, I live here.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? And maybe it's the Gen X in me, but I'm like, I will smack the first person that says that to my face. No, that's not how we do this. But David, I have a question that I guess what happens and kind of what is your opinion about these entheogens being used in a mental health setting, right? Because there's a debate about, well, this isn't where it came from versus now we're changing the container. And it sounds like you're okay for that if it's done right. But I see both sides of this. Hey, we're doing something new. This is a different application, but you're not giving a nod to where it came from either. What are your thoughts in that use case?
Well, I have worked with a lot of people who have been injured by entheogens in my clinic. And the main reason is not because of the entheogens. Okay. The main reason is that the person wasn't prepared. They didn't have the orientation to understand the experience. They didn't have the training to understand the experience. They didn't have the training to get through the experience without it breaking their mind. Okay. And so therefore, the missing piece is preparation. Okay. And so it's the same in yogic traditions and meditation traditions is, things are given in the classical systems, things are given very sequentially. There are systems. You go through a level of training and then the teacher realizes that you're ready for the next level of training. Okay. You don't just go to a retreat and stress out your nervous system from lack of sleep and doing some kind of fasting detox and doing all of this, hyperventilating pranayama and all of that. And then you're surprised that you end up not being able to sleep for 3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
It's out of context in the sense that the person is not trained. And that training means that we have to strengthen the body. It means we have to strengthen the nervous system. We have to strengthen our mind. We have to be able to control our mind to some degree because we're going into a different world. And the laws of reality work differently in that other world. And we have to have a spiritual understanding of the nature of our mind that's grounded enough that if we find ourselves in a hell realm, that we are able to have some degree of subjective awareness that tells us, this is my own mind. I'm in a hell realm. Because otherwise, what will happen is that people's minds will become broken at that point because they will not have the tools or the training to maintain concentration and mindfulness through the intensity of the practice.
So, David, let me ask you about practices like Hopkins, right? Which uses synthetic psilocybin, but they do it at fucking massive doses. I think, what are they using? 6 grams, Tom? It's like some fucking bananas
I think the
number.
study I tried to get into was 7.5 grams.
Yeah. I mean, now I don't know what the correlation between a bag of mushrooms I buy from my guy or 7 grams, but 7 grams of mushrooms is 2 giant bags of those mushrooms, right? Like that's a big fucking bags of mushrooms. I can't even comprehend taking that many mushrooms at one time. That feels like way too much. But apparently the little Holiday Inn room that they put you in at Hopkins is the container that people They don't tend to break. I've never heard. Hopkins got like 20,000 use cases, case studies now.
You know what's interesting? They do. You know, when you're going through the preliminary, and I got excluded, but when I was asking about that kind of stuff, and they say, look, we have the sitters are mental health care workers, but they do have some traditional. And who knows what that level is? Some traditional.
Did you take
reference
a weekend
points.
course?
Yeah. You met a guy from Peru once, or is it like, hey, look, we want to give you that cultural viewpoint and frame it out. But I love the idea that, like, because look, I've done combo, and there was a diet beforehand, and there was like, hey, you're not having sex. I don't want you to do that. And this guy went to the Amazon and studied with those 4 tribes, and I felt taken care of. So even though it wasn't my culture, it wasn't my container, I felt like I was in his, I felt safe in that space. I think he had me set the intention, there was a guide through it that had been there. And I'm wondering, because like, Matt's right. All we hear is great things. And maybe it's because we're in Hopkins' backyard. Maybe they don't, maybe they don't highlight their failures, but it seems like they're doing really good work with it, even though they don't exclude, they're not having that cultural experience.
I'm guaranteeing you there's no cultural reference, David.
Right. Well, I think it's great. I mean, all that really matters is that people are getting some good results. Okay. Because there have been many, many practices that have been done everywhere around the world forever in human history. And it involves all kinds of plants and ceremonies and ascetic practices and all kinds of things. And many of those things were really hard on the body, and they created lots of problems, and people were trained and they still had problems. And so I don't think that there's anything perfect about any of it at all. I think what matters is whether a person comes out of it with a deepened awareness. Okay. And that's what people are looking for. When people go to entheogenic ceremonies, they want healing. Okay. And they're trying to get healing. But what I suggest when I talk to people, because many people ask me, should I do this? And I look at a variety of background factors. Okay. And one of the factors that I look at is that person on any benzodiazepines or SSRIs? Okay. And if they're on psychiatric medications, and I say, no, it's not going to mix very well. Okay.
Right.
And maybe it will, but people say, can I use macrodosing of psilocybin to get off of my SSRIs? And I would say, well, that's probably going to really stress your neurons to try to do it that way. And you're going to come off the mushroom experience and you're still neurologically going to be on SSRIs because it takes months and months to get off of them. So that's one criteria that I look for. And another criteria is, how much experience do you actually have with internalized training to maintain your concentration and your focus and your equanimity and your well-being going through altered states of consciousness. And then there's all kinds of other things that people are asking about. And I don't think it's really the right method. Okay, now for this, we can refer back to a different system. Okay, this is sharing kind of like how I answer that question. Should I do this? I tend to look at things frequently through this lens of Ayurvedic medicine that's called the 5 koshas. Okay, 5 bodies: food body, prana body, mental body, intellectual insight body, and then bliss body of dreamless sleep. Okay, that's a very comprehensive system to understand where the pathology is coming from. Now, what's happening is that people are trying to use a plant that has a very strong effect on one of those layers, which is mental activity. Okay, but we don't know that that's the right level that plant should be working on. So in some cases, I say, well, maybe that's something that you can work on later, but for now, you should really take care of your obesity and your blood sugar and your cholesterol and, all of these kind of things. You should get the body healthier first, because people are thinking, well, I'm having these health problems because of my past trauma, and I want to get rid of the trauma, and therefore I want to have this entheogenic experience. But really, they're going to feel a whole lot better, and their trauma is going to clear up a lot faster if they just get themselves healthier physically first. Okay, so it's important to help people sort out what to do first, second, and third, and use the right medicine for the right layer of the body or the energy or the mind or the spirit. So that's a very helpful model that I have found, because people are trying to jump ahead, and they're thinking that if they use entheogens, it's going to resolve a lot of issues. I have found that a lot of issues don't even appear if we reduce our inflammation and relax more.
Yeah.
So
Tom said that before. He's like, my clinic wouldn't exist if people just took a walk every once in a while, dipped in the river.
If people lived more in harmony with nature. Yeah. And honestly, somebody said, what do you specialize in? I said, inflammation and stress.
Yeah.
That's it.
Why? It's the root cause of everything.
Yeah. I could be blindfolded, throw a dart, and hit one of these things on you.
You will have that if you're human.
Here's another real important distinction to make when it comes to entheogens and natural medicine in general. Entheogens produce a really intense experience for a short period of time. Okay? And that's one context, one strategy, one purpose, one aim, one goal. Okay? But then there is the actual, what we could call karmic homework. All right? And the karmic homework is that there's really no way around who we are except to retrain ourselves. And this is really important when it comes to getting out of PTSD and all forms of being traumatized, where people have not metabolized their memories. And if they have not metabolized their memories, then in some cases, an entheogenic experience can help them do that really quickly. It can give them a really broad perspective, and a lot of metabolism can happen really quickly. Or it can really throw them off center and make things much worse. But even if they do metabolize a lot of things, have a lot of insights, and have beautiful feelings for the first time, and feel touched by the light, and they feel that they've been blessed, and the experience is really deep and positive and profound, they still are going to be themselves the next day. Okay. And therefore, it has to be balanced with a long-term dedication to understanding, how do we turn off the triggers neurologically? This is the most important aspect that I focus on with people. It's not that you have to learn how to meditate. You have to learn how to activate the relaxation response, because meditation agitates people's minds. Meditation doesn't work for a lot of people these days. And so therefore, doing a meditation retreat can be just as disturbing to people as doing an entheogen. So the place where I start is body-mind interface, okay, and learn what it feels like to turn off the sympathetic and turn on the parasympathetic. It's a body sensation. You actually can feel the parasympathetic activation spreading through the body with just deep relaxation, deep breathing. And you can learn how to turn it on at will. And that's much more important as a daily ongoing practice. And if you know how to do that, then you can maintain that through a real intense entheogenic experience. And if you have a real intense entheogenic experience, then you can go even deeper and retrain the nervous system so that you are in a much better state, living in present time and not so triggered by the past. So that's a very important thing that I think is missing, because people are also, going back to the idea of, influencer internet medicine. Okay, everybody is looking for a quick fix. and everybody is doing adaptogens, and everybody's, they all want the stress reducing, meditation enhancing herbs.
Yeah, I should have been a reishi farmer, by the way. Fucking making a fortune.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we can't get out of doing the work. We have to have a practice that goes deeper and deeper neurologically. We have to retrain the brain every single day to find inner peace.
You know what, though? We used to have to do that to survive. Now it's almost an elective course. And I think that's the reason why most people are electing not to do it, right? Because it's like
disagree.
there's no...
I think that
really?
we need... I think it was more an elective course in the past, and now it's necessary to survive.
So okay, that's interesting. So let me tell you why I think that is, because if I was calm and collected, something chasing me to kill me, at least I could process easier. Now people like checking out, like doom scrolling's like a thing, right? Like people just literally abdicate their literal consciousness to a digital device. Like if you're willing to do that, there's no fucking way you're going to commit to a daily practice of anything other than doom scrolling.
But
like
that's okay. But that's okay. You see, everything is changing in the world really fast, and it's getting really hot, and it's going to be getting really hot really fast. Okay. And therefore, I think that a lot of the current concerns that we have, like doom scrolling and internet medicine, I think a lot of these things are not going to matter much for much longer, okay? Because I think that we are on the cusp of becoming a highly, highly stressed civilization that's going to require,
We're not there yet?
No, we are. And we're seeing all of its manifestations. But I think what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that we don't have all these luxuries of, these distractions and entertainment and all of these things that we have now, because in a certain way, if we go back to that question of the Gaian mind and the technological mind, it's like everybody's focused on their screens and nobody's noticing that it's getting really hot out fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like the frog boiling in the pot,
Exactly. And so I think that it's probably accurate to say that modern society, because of the luxuries and technologies that we have, come up with, that in a certain way that we are rather spiritually immature. Okay.
Yeah.
And we can say that great spiritual maturity has come out of cultures where they had to deal with life and death every day, right there. Okay. And we're very disconnected from life and death for the most part. And I think that we're going to be seeing these kind of realities much more clearly. So, there's a word, sometimes people say apocalypse, and they think that, it means, the end of the world. But what it means really is it means revelation. Apocalypse, the Greek origin of the word apocalypse means lifting of the veils. It means the revealing of the truth. And we know that right now that governments are operating entirely based on lies. Okay.
Sure.
And I think that
they're not doing anything new either, though,
But the weather doesn't lie.
No, I'm talking about the weather. I'm saying governments just never were able to do all this behind closed doors. Now that's less so.
No,
I think
exactly. But what I'm saying, when I look at what's happening in the world right now and the stress that's now coming to all of us more and more, I look at it through the lens that this is the time when the truth will be revealed. And I don't mean that in a Christian sense. What I mean is that we're going to understand our role in nature. We're going to understand that humans are completely dependent on these macro forces of the weather and the elements, water and soil and plants and food production and microbes. And so we have a place on Earth. Okay. And this is a great revelation that can come out of entheogenic use, is that we can experience this biological intelligence inside of us. Okay. But I think that that's basically what's going to happen. And it's not going to be pleasant, but it could be very deeply spiritually illuminating, and it could lead to great maturation spiritually of our culture.
I think you're saying things that we've heard a lot of people on this show.
I feel like,
about, like
somebody told us something similar last week.
Yeah, and I love that. And
I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one.
No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, it's almost encouraging to hear this on repeat, because I think it's real easy to kind of shit on the world and be like, we're all fucked.
And I think we're also all hearing this is the end. Look at this. We've never had this technology where we could really just off ourselves this quick. You know, I do feel like
we had that in the Cold War. We could have done that
exactly.
already, you know, like,
exactly. I mean, but now, hey, you're 30 seconds to midnight now on the clock, and you're like, oh God, we've never been this close. You know,
yeah, I've always wanted to know who runs that clock. You know, like, what are they selling? You know, I don't know. David, listen, man, I want to talk to you for like the next month, but we're going to have to cut it off at some point. But before we go, I just wanted to kind of get into like what you're doing now, and like sort of like how we can rally around you. I love your message. I love the work you've done. And honestly, the reason our show is so encouraging to Tom and I is because we more and more get to talk to people like you. So I really love that we got to have this conversation.
Yeah, so this was very meaningful for me.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. I feel the same. And thank you for asking. I'll just, if it's the appropriate time, I'll just
it's the David Crow commercial now. Let's do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Marketing moment here.
Totally.
My website is crowconsultations.com, CROW, consultationsplural.com. And that's where I have my telemedicine consultations. And that's also where I have some archived online courses, and I do free events. And I have a collection of these gatherings that I do. You know, I have a following of people that appreciate what I say, and so I have a number of lectures and guided meditations and so forth that are also posted there. So that's crowconsultations.com. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's awesome. You know, it's funny. I never thought when I was a younger guy that I'd be into this stuff, but the more I get into it, the more I realize, like, I think it's almost funny that people are calling this like an awakening or a revelation. I'm like, no, we just fell asleep in a drunken hangover for like 200 years or so. And now we just need to like wake up, like throw your head in the horse trough and get your shit together, buddy. Mm-hmm. We got to get things back in action. I mean, like that, and that's where I was going with that earlier comment. Like, look, when life and death hinged on it, like you didn't have to wonder what nutrition was, or you didn't give a shit about how many steps you were taking in a day, because none of it fucking mattered. Like, you're just like, no, I got to stay alive. And these are the things I do to do that. And now it's, you know, in Chick-fil-A and TikTok, you don't really have to worry about how to stay a survival. You know, like there's no, you know, like surviving's easy. Like, you know.
Well, this is a unique time for the people who are interested in questions like, is there an ultimate spiritual goal? Is there a particular purpose in my life? And that has always been there. Every generation throughout human history is that everybody has a very short time here, and every culture has gone through its own apocalypse. And so therefore, what it really comes down to is, here we are, and we have all of this information and knowledge now. And what am I going to do in relationship to what's happening in the world? And so for myself, you know, I have chosen to be of some service to humanity through using very ancient methods of using plants for healing and integrating spiritual teachings with that. And that has given me some perspective that makes it very helpful to understand what's happening in the world also.
Right. Yeah, that experience part, that's where I was saying at the top of the show, like it's a tricky difference between like my personal evolution and the world evolution, because obviously they're attached in a certain chronology, but like the world is different and I'm older, and now like that all means different stuff, you know? So David, man, awesome talking to you, brother. It was really cool. I thank you so much.
Deep, man.
Yeah, thank you both.
Scott Mason did not let us down. Yeah.
Okay. Really, really great to talk with like-minded guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. David, stick around. Guys, see you next time. Enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Okay,
talk to you soon.
Take care.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.